what if the absolute worst way to read the most famous, most influential book in human history is to just, start at page 1 and read it straight through to the end?
I mean, it's definitely a counterintuitive thought. We are just so conditioned to open a book, look at the table of contents, and expect a logical progression.
Right, like a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Exactly.
But today, we are taking a deep dive into some really fascinating historical critical scholarship to do something, well, kind of radical.
Yeah, we really are.
We're taking the Bible based on these sources. We're basically ripping out the binding and putting it all back together based purely on when the texts were actually written and edited.
Which, completely shatters that illusion of a single static story just dictated from the clouds.
Yeah.
Instead, what emerges in the scholarship is this chronological library. It's documenting a growing, constantly changing religion that was just relentlessly dominated by foreign world empires.
So our mission for you today is to show you how every single theological shift in this massive text was actually a direct survival response. A response to whichever superpower happened to be crushing them at the time.
Right. It's all about survival.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you reorder the books by authorship, you do not start with this peaceful, perfect Garden of Eden. The actual historical beginning of this library is incredibly chaotic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the oldest written texts in the Bible emerge around the 8th to 7th century BCE. And historically, the starting line isn't Genesis at all.
Wait, really? What is it then?
It's the prophet Amos.
Amos. Okay, so the best way I can picture this for everyone listening is to imagine finding this ancient, dusty family diary up in an attic.
Right. I love this analogy.
Yeah. You crack it open and you expect page 1 to be, I don't know, a peaceful entry about a birth in the family or a quiet day on the farm.
Yeah, totally.
But instead, page 1 is written frantically in the middle of a terrifying home invasion.
That is exactly what it is. Amos isn't, strolling through a garden naming animals. He is screaming at wealthy elites in the northern kingdom of Samaria for crushing the poor.
Yeah, and he's not alone, right?
No, not at all. He, along with Hosea and Micah, they are furiously warning their people of this impending doom.
Because the geopolitical reality of their time was just terrifying. I mean, Israel and Judah were sovereign nations, sure, but they were constantly threatened by local Canaanite influences and, well, more importantly, by the brutal rise of the Neo-Assyrian Empire.
Right. Survival was the baseline of their entire theology.
So how does that actually translate into the text? Because the Assyrians weren't just like making threats, they actually invaded.
Yeah, they did. In 722 BCE, the Assyrian Empire completely conquers and deports the northern kingdom of Israel.
Wow.
And in the ancient world, if you lose a war, the standard logic is pretty simple. Your god just got beat up by their god.
Which is exactly the theological crisis these early writers faced, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if they admit Assyria's gods are stronger, their religion dies right there on the spot.
It's just over.
Yeah, it's over. So prophets like 1st Isaiah, which makes up chapters 1 through 39 of the book of Isaiah. By the way, they do something totally brilliant.
What do they do?
Well, instead of conceding defeat, they claim that YHWH, their god, is actually using the Assyrian superpower as a rod of anger.
Oh, wow. That is a massive psychological pivot.
Right.
They basically save their theology by claiming ownership of the disaster.
Yes, exactly.
They're essentially saying, Assyria isn't defeating us. Our God is just using Assyria to discipline us for being disobedient.
Precisely. They frame the geopolitical loss as divine discipline. Assyria is reduced to just a mere tool in the hands of their own god.
I mean, that strategy works for a while, right? Owning the disaster keeps the religion intact. But what happens when the next empire rolls in and doesn't just conquer them, but actually wipes out their entire religious infrastructure?
Yeah, that happens in 586 BCE. The Neo-Babylonian Empire rolls in and they destroy Jerusalem.
Just total devastation.
Total. They burned the temple to the ground, and the Jewish elites are dragged off into exile in Babylon.
I want to pause here really quickly because we really need to understand the mechanics of this trauma.
That's huge.
Up until this point, their religion was like a massive mainframe computer that was physically tied to a building, the temple in Jerusalem.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, and when the Babylonians destroyed that building, the physical connection was severed. So they had to rewrite their theology into a cloud-based system so they could access God from anywhere in the empire.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the destruction of the temple force is arguably the most massive theological leap in the entire library.
Because they're in exile now.
Exactly. The exiled priests and prophets begin this frantic rescue mission to write down and compile their oral traditions. And the sources point out that it is in Babylon that strict, absolute monotheism is officially invented.
Wait, hold on. I'm a little confused. I mean, I thought they were already worshiping just one god from the very beginning. Are you saying they weren't strictly monotheistic before this?
Yeah, it's actually a really common misconception. Before the exile, the prevailing belief was closer to monolatry.
Monolatry. What do they
It
know?
means they worshipped only one god, but they fully acknowledged that other nations had their own real gods, too.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the attitude was basically, our God is the best God among many.
Got it.
But in exile, writers like Deutero-Isaiah, so that's chapters 40 to 55 of Isaiah, they take this massive leap. They make the first explicit declarations in the text that foreign gods literally do not exist.
Which actually explains why they suddenly start mocking Babylonian idols in the text, like calling them useless blocks of wood.
Right, yeah.
If they don't upgrade their god to the sole creator of the entire cosmos, then Babylon just wins.
Exactly.
But if there is only one god who controls all nations, then Babylon is just playing a temporary role in a much larger divine plan.
You nailed it. The religion becomes universally portable. And while they are doing this, they heavily edit the Torah.
Books like Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus.
Right, and Numbers. They do this to preserve their identity. They lock in markers that you don't need a temple for,
Right.
like the Sabbath, circumcision, and dietary laws.
And they also use these edits to retroactively write their past against the empires that oppress them, right? I mean, the Exodus story is a perfect example of this.
Oh, absolutely.
The plagues in Egypt aren't just random, scary disasters. The scholarship shows that Jewish tradition structures them as highly specific, direct attacks on the Egyptian pantheon.
Right, it's very intentional.
Like, turning the Nile to blood was a direct challenge to Hapi, the god of the Nile. The plague of darkness was an attack on Ra, the sun god. It's basically ancient theological trash talk.
That is the perfect way to describe it. And that retrospective framing reaches its absolute peak in Genesis.
Okay, let's talk about Genesis.
Yeah, so if we are reading the Bible in the order it was written, we don't actually get the final polished version of Genesis until the Babylonian exile.
Which is mind-blowing.
It is. The exiled writers were surrounded by a Mesopotamian religion, specifically the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish.
Right, and in that Babylonian myth, you have these chaotic, squabbling gods who create humans, basically, just to be their slaves.
Exactly. So the Jewish writers take that exact raw material and they strip all the polytheism right out of it.
Wow.
Yeah, they present one God who speaks an orderly world into existence and creates humans not as slaves, but in his own divine image.
Here's where it gets really interesting for anyone listening. If Genesis was finalized during this deeply traumatic exile, then trying to read it as a modern science textbook completely misses the point.
Totally misses it.
It was a defiant shout of hope from homesick exile saying, your gods didn't make this world to enslave us. Our God made this world. It is orderly and it is good.
It just changes the reading entirely. But of course, Babylon eventually falls. The Achaemenid Persian Empire conquers them, and the Persians actually allow the Jews to return home to Jerusalem.
So the Persians let them go back, but they bring their own worldview with them, which leaves a completely new, 300-year footprint on the text. Because Persia's state religion was Zoroastrianism.
Right, and Zoroastrianism fundamentally viewed the universe as a cosmic battleground.
Like a literal war.
Yes, a literal war between a god of absolute light and goodness and a god of absolute darkness and evil.
So how does that actually change the Jewish text? Because up until now, from what you're saying, God was responsible for everything, both the good and the bad.
Right. Well, exposure to that Persian dualism deeply influenced Jewish thought in the post-exilic era. Suddenly, the theology introduces a personalized figure of evil.
Satan.
Exactly. You start seeing hierarchies of angels and demons. You also see the introduction of a final cosmic judgment where the good are rewarded and the evil are punished.
Okay, so Persian rule gives them this cosmic framework of good and evil. But then the Greeks roll in.
Yeah, they do.
The Hellenistic era brings Greek philosophy, which introduces a whole new set of questions.
Yeah.
This is when we get wisdom literature, right?
Yeah.
Like Job and Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, they are really wrestling with the Greek-influenced problem of evil.
Right, the whole if God is good And God is all-powerful. Why do we suffer so much?
Exactly. And that philosophical suffering soon becomes horrific physical suffering.
Yeah, things get really bad.
Very bad. In 167 BCE, the Greek king Antiochus V Epiphanes pushes for absolute cultural assimilation.
He outlaws Jewish practices entirely, right?
Entirely. Under pain of death, he desecrates the temple. And this trauma is what sparks the Maccabean revolt.
It's just such an intense period. And the sources say this specific trauma births the Book of Daniel, written around 165 BCE.
Yes.
It introduces full-blown apocalyptic literature to the library.
Yeah.
Its entire purpose is to assure suffering Jews that God will eventually intervene and defeat these beastly empires. But I have to ask, on behalf of everyone listening right now, if this dualism was adopted from Persian Zoroastrianism and the apocalyptic imagery was a reaction to Greek trauma, does that mean the theology was just borrowed?
Well, this raises a really important question, and it's one scholars debate constantly. But looking at the text chronologically, it strongly suggests this wasn't just casual borrowing, it was a psychological necessity.
How so?
Think about the progression. Under the Assyrians and Babylonians, prophetic literature was enough.
Like God is using them to punish us.
Right, or God is testing us. But under the Greeks, your culture is being actively erased. If you practice your faith, you are executed.
So prophetic literature just doesn't work anymore. I mean, you can't exactly tell a mother whose child was killed for being Jewish that God is just testing them.
Exactly. You need a much more extreme framework to resist. The shift to apocalyptic literature provided a cosmic rationale.
It gave them something bigger.
Right, it told the persecuted, the suffering isn't your fault anymore. There are cosmic forces of evil at work in the heavenly realms. But hold on, because God is going to intervene, break into history, and destroy the monsters.
Wow. It's an escalating scale of resistance,
Yeah.
which sets a dramatic stage for the empire that casts the longest, darkest shadow over the entire library.
Rome.
Rome, the New Testament era.
Yeah.
The Roman shadow is just everywhere in the text. The New Testament begins under brutal military occupation.
Right.
I mean, crucifixion isn't just a tragic background event. The sources make it clear it is a very specific, highly visible Roman state execution method meant to terrorize rebellious populations.
Yes, absolutely.
So when Jesus announces a kingdom of God, it is a direct, deliberate rival to the kingdom of Rome. But the way this Roman-era resistance is documented completely defies what most people assume about the New Testament timeline.
It really does. Because the standard assumption is that the Gospels, the biographies of Jesus, were written first.
Like journalistic reports as the events were happening.
Right. But if we stick to our timeline of authorship, they aren't. The letters of Paul come first, decades before anyone writes a single gospel.
Decades.
Yeah. 1 Thessalonians is the oldest surviving Christian writing from around 50 CE. Then you have Romans, written around 57 CE.
What's fascinating here is that Paul isn't writing a comprehensive history, is he?
No, not at all. He is writing immediate practical instruction to tiny, scattered house churches who are just trying to figure out how to exist within the massive Roman machine without getting completely crushed.
So when do we get the actual biographies of Jesus?
Not until after a massive cataclysmic event.
Oh, okay.
In 70 CE, the Jewish population revolts against Rome. And in response, the Roman army lays siege to Jerusalem and completely destroys the Second Temple.
Oh, wow. It's the Babylonian trauma all over again, the destruction of the cultural center.
Exactly the same kind of trauma.
The way I visualize this is by looking at early oral storytellers. They look around after 70 CE, they realize their generation is aging, the original eyewitnesses are being killed off by Rome, and the temple is gone.
Right.
So panic sets in. It's a desperate scramble to hit record before the history is lost forever.
And you can really feel that panic in the first gospel to be written, which is the Gospel of Mark.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, Mark is written around 70 CE, right in the ashes of the war. It is incredibly fast-paced, urgent, and tense.
Then, I'm guessing in the 80s and 90s CE, as the shock kind of settles, the other texts follow.
Yes, and they are highly tailored for the different communities that survived the war. Matthew is written to prove to a Jewish audience that Jesus is the Messiah. Luke and the Book of Acts are written for a Greek-speaking audience.
In John.
Finally, you get John in the 90s CE, presenting a highly cosmic, divine Christ.
Which brings us to the absolute other end of the biblical library. We started with Genesis responding to the empires of Mesopotamia, and now we arrive at the ultimate subversion.
The Book of Revelation responding to Rome.
Written around 95 CE. And just like Genesis wasn't a science textbook, The historical sources emphasize that Revelation is not a crystal ball roadmap of the 21st century.
No, definitely not.
It is a piece of subversive, anti-Roman, political, and religious resistance literature for people living in the first century.
To understand Revelation, you really have to understand the Roman imperial cult. By the late first century, Roman emperors were actively deifying themselves.
Claiming to be gods.
Exactly. Temples were built for their worship, and citizens were expected to offer sacrifices and literally declare, Caesar is Lord.
Which, to early Christians, was the ultimate blasphemy. I mean, they absolutely could not do.
They couldn't. So the writer of Revelation uses highly coded apocalyptic language to attack the empire.
Give us an example of the code.
Sure. So in Revelation 13, there is the beast from the sea. Historically, scholars say this represents the military and political power of the Roman Empire arriving on the shores of the Mediterranean.
Okay.
Then there is the beast from the earth, which represents the local provincial priests whose literal job was to enforce the imperial cult worship.
Oh, wow. So what does this all mean for one of the most famous misunderstood symbols in the entire book, the mark of the beast?
Oh, yeah.
Because the text says that without this mark, you cannot buy or sell. Pop culture has turned this into like a barcode or a microchip, but the historical sources suggest it refers to everyday Roman coinage, right?
Right. Roman coins were stamped with the divine image of the emperor. They literally carried the claim of the emperor's divinity right there on the metal.
Let's just make this real for a second for everyone listening. Imagine if to buy a carton of eggs today, you had to physically hand over a coin that declared a politician you absolutely despised was literally God.
Yeah.
You have to actively commit blasphemy just to feed your family.
Yeah.
That is the agonizing daily reality Revelation is screaming against.
Yes.
Using money was a daily, unavoidable negotiation with state-sponsored idolatry.
It really was. And the writer doesn't pull any punches either. In Revelation 17, they describe the harlot of Babylon sitting on a beast with 7 heads.
7 heads.
Yeah, and the writer explicitly states that the 7 heads are 7 hills.
A direct, unmistakable reference to Rome. I mean, it's universally famous for being built on 7 hills. The code isn't even trying to be subtle at that point.
Not at all. And it perfectly mirrors the evolution of the library we've been tracking today.
Yeah, it really does.
By the time we reach Revelation, you have a church using the ultimate symbolic war of words to survive an empire demanding their total allegiance. Revelation asserts that the crucified lamb, who is a victim of Roman state violence, is the true King of Kings, not Caesar.
It is just incredible. By taking these texts, ripping out the binding, and rearranging them by the history of their authorship, the entire picture changes.
It really does.
We aren't looking at a static monologue. We're looking at a dynamic, chronological library of human resistance.
Yeah.
From Amos screaming at elites in Samaria to terrified exiles writing the defiant hope of Genesis and Babylon,
Right.
all the way to John coding brilliant anti-Roman propaganda in Revelation. The theology had to evolve as a survival mechanism against empires that wanted to crush them.
It is a profound testament to resilience. And, it leaves us with something quite striking to think about, particularly regarding that mark of the beast and the Roman coinage.
Oh, the idea that everyday commerce was a moral crisis.
Yes. If early believers viewed simply using the everyday money of their empire as a forced daily negotiation with state-sponsored idolatry, it raises an important question for you today.
What's the question?
When you look at your own life, how often do you find yourself forced to participate in economic or political systems that fundamentally clash with your own core values just to survive?
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that daily negotiation?
That is a heavy, vital question to carry with you. It turns out that dusty family diary from the attic has a lot more to say about our present reality than we might have thought. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. Keep questioning the table of contents, and we'll catch you next time.